Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Instinct. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, it's a very interesting case that they get in this episode. Essentially, there's this dude who's killed in a very unique way. It's called scaphism. It's actually pretty damn brutal. Essentially, you basically stuff someone full of milk and honey, and then basically get them to they have diarrhea, and you keep doing it till basically bugs and stuff come to infest them and kind of eat on their flesh and stuff, and then you slap them in between two boats, making it so that the hands and the feet are exposed specifically so the bugs will get to them like that. That's a pretty gnarly way of kind of torture. It seems like the way Dylan was talking about it, it seems like a very old school manner of torture. It seems like the victim in this episode, his name is Thomas O'Hare. He is a divorce lawyer, and it's interesting, and there's different people throughout the case who do seem like they have motives. There's the lady Sarah. Her divorce is interesting because it's like, oh hey, Thomas defended my husband, who was a con man, who not only ripped off a whole bunch of other women, but he made sure that I walked away. Thomas made sure I walked away with nothing. So there's that. What's interesting in the case is that this dude named Lon ends up confessing to the crime. It's like, oh, okay, what's up with that? But then he dies from eating what's his face, cyanide. I don't remember if I know initially it's like, oh, he most likely had to make a death confession because it's like he felt so guilty about what he had done, especially because not only did you kill someone, you went through such a brutal thing. Because remember, that whole process apparently is going to take like 12 or so days, because it's going to be a thing of it was something around that, because that's what the whole length of the torture, it took that long for the torture, and then probably between days 13 and 17 is kind of when the person finally dies. It's like, that's excruciating and terrible. So, but it seems like, oh, maybe the case is all wrapped up, but then certain things didn't sit right with Dylan or Lizzie when she ends up talking with Ryan, they're sparring. It clicks in her head whoever hit him had to be someone that was left-handed, but Lon was a right-handed person. So I was like, okay, so there's something up with this whole situation. So they end up looking deeper into it. It almost seems like the go-to target would probably be the ex-wife Margot, because apparently she is seen as, well, because Becca, the paralegal, is kind of like, oh yeah, she was terrible, he was trying to get away from her. The fact of the matter is, she knows about Scarfism, but luckily Julian was able to kind of tap into a phone and kind of found out some encrypted messages and stuff between three different people. So it's not just one person in this murder; it's three people. And I'm like, oh, we've been presented three different suspects. Obviously, Vickers, Lon, and you have Sarah, but then it's like, all right, the third person must be the ex-wife, but the ex-wife talks about the fact that because she was away for her job for a little while, but she didn't want to admit it was basically her getting some work done on herself. So, but it's it turns out the one behind all this is actually Becca. It's actually kind of sad when you actually break down her situation. Essentially, Thomas represented her parents during the divorce, rather specifically her dad, and her dad ended up getting custody of her her sister. I don't remember if it was big or little, but regardless. And basically during an accident where her dad was super drunk, it ended up with her sister getting fatally wounded, and basically she was in a condition for 12 or so days full of just pain. So that's what this whole torture was meant to be about. It was reflecting what her sister went through. And ultimately, she ended up dying from the whole situation. So it's okay, essentially Becca's the mastermind behind everything, because she's the one that recruited everyone, gathering up as many people as she can, because, being his paralegal, assuming that's the reason why she took the job, probably working with him in the first place, because that's been manifesting for a long time, her need for revenge against him. So once again, the situation it's not good that they did what they did, in particular in Becca's case, but at the same time you're damn, the tragedy that, it's because Thomas is, no matter what the circumstances are, like I said, using Sarah's case, of oh yeah, he's definitely a con man, but Thomas still represented her ex-husband regardless. Sadly, he was just a lawyer that was really, really good at his job. It was actually quite interesting how they ended up getting a confession out of the whole situation, because Sarah wasn't willing to talk, but I was like, oh, Zach is they made it seem like he was another suspect in this. He's playing word search or whatever with Sarah, they have Becca walk by, and it's like, okay, then already got that mulling in her head. She's sitting in a room for an hour or two baking, and then they put Sarah in the same room, and obviously, like, push comes to shove, and Becca's like, oh, I saw you write down your confessions. Like, no, I was playing word search. But obviously, like, from Becca's point of view, it's like, I'm not stupid. Like, really, you come up with such a lame excuse? Turns out to be the case, and you end up having Sarah bring up, about the body and stuff like that, and it's like, wait, what? Shut your mouth. And it's just kind of a back and forth of like, who blamed who. She's like, oh, it was just Alon and Sarah that touched the body. I never did. But it's like, oh, you're the one that came up with the master plan. You were there. And it's like, oh, well, technically Sarah didn't sell you out. Technically you sold her out first. And it's like, oh, Zach presents himself to be a detective. And it's so interesting. It's just like a very nice and smart, intellectual, very nice way of kind of figuring that out, like getting them to kind of confess like that. There was some other interesting things in this case too. I like a lot of the humor in this case, just the whole situation of like, for one, it's like, oh, who's going to wear this fingerprint so we can get a good fingerprint? Because they peeled off the dude's fingerprint to make it so like, okay, so who's going to put this on so that we can get his fingerprint? I love Dylan raises his hand and you have Lizzie pointing towards him, but then he grabs Lizzie's finger and presents, and she's looking like, really? Okay, fine. And there's also the situation of like, okay, I got a very interesting case for you. At the moment Dylan got there and saw the, scaphism, he got excited. He's like, ooh, it's like, you could be a little less excited about murder, Dylan. But nevertheless, I love that. Also, like, it's so interesting because it seems like Dylan and Lizzie have like a very complicated, like a very interesting relationship with Ryan. The fact is that it seems like they both like really like him, and it's just kind of like almost like a little bit of a jealousy. I guess it's almost like, it's not like a significant other thing. I think it's like a cheating partner type of thing of like, oh no, I'm working with him. It's like, no, I'm working, because it's like Dylan, like Ryan comes up with an idea of tracking like the honey, and then Dylan's like, oh, that's a great idea. Lizzie's like, no, it's a good idea. And then later on, she's sparring with Ryan, and Dylan's like, wait, you were sparring with Ryan? She's like, come on, don't get jealous. I love that. It's just because it's like, whoa, you're cheating on me, partner? It's like, well, you acting all gushy about him and stuff like that. Like, what am I, chopped liver? Like, that's how I interpret that. I think it's kind of a cute aspect of their partnership. But the whole situation I thought was kind of interesting was kind of learning a little bit more about Ryan. It's like, okay, like, does he miss Nebraska? And for him, it's like, he might not go back home just because home doesn't feel like home. Like the place shutting down was one thing, but the murder in itself was just kind of like the final nail in a coffin. It just doesn't feel like home. He felt like he never would have left his home. He feels like he would have lived there and died there, Even at point later on, Dylan gets so excited to talk to him on the phone, even kind of makes a pun calling him honey. It's like they're talking about honey, and it's like, honey. And it's just like, you have Lizzie just being like, come on, just stop. I even love it later on when Dylan and that B lady are talking, and he's like, well, I guess you could say we're here on a sting. And her and Dylan kind of go laughing in a little laughing fit, and you have Lizzie looking, they're not laughing, being like, okay, what the hell is wrong with you? Why are you guys laughing so much about that? I love the tension cutting in that regard. I also love the whole thing of like, oh yeah, it feels like we're in a horror movie. Who do you think would die first? And she's like, oh, you totally die first. It's like me. It's like, she's like, yeah, for one, you're a male, plus you're older. Me, I'm the young blonde, so I'd be the one that ends up running, screaming, and then tripping and falling in front of the killer. But Dylan's like, no, it'd definitely be you because you are the blonde, and blondes die before brunettes. And yes, I'm not a brunette anymore, but the fact of the matter is I'm not a blonde, so that still means that you'd be the first one to go. So I just love that was a conversation with them. It's the morbid and crazy conversations they end up having, which is kind of interesting because you would think like, oh, because like, I think people would kind of have that conversation anyway, but I think it's even more morbid because it's a cop, and well, I guess it's just because of that it kind of adds to the absurdity, or rather just kind of like the craziness of the conversation. What I thought was a really interesting thing too was like when later on it comes up that like Ryan's leaving, because Dylan dropped him off, and his phone's there. I'm like, don't tell me we're going to get the twist that Ryan is actually a killer. I mean, we saw the killer to a certain extent last episode, but part of me still wondering like maybe there's more to this. Like I was like, please don't tell me it's like actually Ryan. That'd be kind of twisted. But I mean, I think it'd be an interesting twist. But there was a part of me kind of thinking that, but like just the fact is Dylan, that he left his phone in Dylan's truck, made me go like, oh, is he going to find something up there that's going to implicate him? But I was like, no, it was just like, oh, I'm going to follow him to his, wait. And there's a blanket waiting. Now the question is, did he kill someone in Ryan's place, or is it suggesting that Ryan is the next victim? I think it's it could be interpreted either way. That's going to be really interesting finding out which one it is. I assume it's the former and not the latter. I think because the thing is, the killer is getting brazen, and that's even something Dylan had talked about. The fact is, the killer acting this way, this kind of duality and stuff like that. It seemed like we're seeing the birth of a serial killer. So the question becomes like, if it could be interpreted as like, oh, I killed someone in your place, you're a cop, and I'm getting brazen to the point I'm gonna kill someone here because I dare you to try and catch me. Like I'm caught. I'm loving this game we're having. Or it's supposed to be a thing of like, oh, imagine that you're the next victim. I'm going to kill you, a cop. I mean, to be fair, it might even just be like, oh, it might not even be Ryan. It might just be someone else who's a cop. Maybe it's someone who looks like Ryan. Who knows? That's definitely going to be interesting to see where that goes. But I also like, obviously, the personal aspects of this episode, too. One, let's deal with Lizzie's situation. Obviously, it's like, oh, everything's good. And then she happens to walk into Dylan and Andy's place, and it's like, lo and behold, who's there? It's Julian. And she's like, wait. And there's a part of me wonders, like, oh, was he actually not gone the entire time? Lo and behold, he's like, no, I was. Like, I wouldn't lie to you. I got here a couple hours ago. I figured you were working, didn't want to bother you. And she's like, no, it's just convenient for you that things kind of play out like that, huh? Well, she says something charming to her, and she's like, literally stop being charming while I'm being mad at you. But she sees a wound, and he's like, well, she's like, what's up with that? And he's like, can't tell you. And it's like, I guess we have nothing more to talk about. It's like, oh, you see it. It's like, oh, they're bad. But then it's like, oh, good. Things are good. Oh, things are bad again. And that's a whole complicated thing, because for Lizzie, it's like she's dating, a spy. And that's that hard. I mean, Dylan and Andy kind of had that whole situation. I mean, Dylan ended up leaving his job behind as a spy because of that whole aspect. You can't tell anyone in your life anything. There's just a lot of stuff you have to play close to the vest. I'd assumed that everything related to Julian in this case was going to be like what he was working on and stuff like that. I assumed it was connected to the person that came after him before, but maybe it's him actually doing his job as a spy, or maybe it's a combination of the two. I'm wondering, because he's independent, isn't he? He's not actually working as I forgot, like, because I'm trying to think, is he like outright with the CIA, or is he kind of just independent to a certain, like I forgot what Julian's whole situation. Maybe he is pure. No, I think he is just straight up working with the CIA. Like I said, I just forgot what his position is. Regardless, so there's an interesting thing of like I was saying, like that maybe the two things are related. Maybe him getting attacked earlier in the season was connected to his work, like someone trailed it back to him. Maybe it's unrelated. I'd assume it's all related, but I was assuming everything he did was related to his particular situation, or trying to find out who the person is that came to his place. But it's like, but now it seems like, oh, he's working on other things, or maybe him even getting wounded. Is that because that was one thing he didn't want to tell Lizzie? That's his main reason for not being like, oh, being upfront about what he does. Is it just the spy stuff, or is this because it deals with that specific thing he was dealing with? The whole reason why he became Jules and whatnot. I'd assume it's all connected to that, more stuff he's not telling Lizzie. And the sad thing is, when it's all said and done, because for Lizzie, it's a thing of like, yes, I'm a cop. My job is pretty dangerous. That's a hard enough thing on its own for most people to deal with. But at the very least, hey, Julian knows where she is at all times. She doesn't. It's like, oh, you could be telling me you're going here, but when in actuality you're going there. I know nothing. I mean, that was an issue that had already come up before. It's like she doesn't really know much about Julian. It's like there's one step forward, and then there's like 3 steps back when it came to the relationship. And, that's a hard thing to handle, because it's like, oh, like if he could have gotten hurt, and that thought scares her. Well, he did get hurt. It's like, if he ended up dying or something happened to him, would I have even found out? And Dylan's like, yeah, you would have. You would have been known eventually that he died, but you never would have known how it happened. That would have been something they would have kept top secret, just because it would mean explaining where he was that led to the circumstances of his death, to the point Lizzie literally has to break up with him in any episode, because for Julian it's like, the fact of the matter is, my work is very important to me, but I'm falling in love with you, so the fact is I can balance both. I can have both. But for Lizzie, it's like that's not something that can work with her, like the stress of like not knowing that aspect. There's always going to be a part of you that's hidden away from me that I'll never know. And also, it's bad enough having to worry about you, but I got to worry even more because I won't know what you're up to, what your mission, I won't find out what actually happened to you, That's the tough world of being a spy, Because the government would just hide a lot of that stuff. So I just thought, it's kind of sad to see things kind of play out that way, especially because that means, like, Julian, like, I'd assume he's still going to be Jules, and that's going to make the whole working condition awkward. I'm curious to see what that means. Like, Jasmine had already picked up some stuff there between, Lizzie and Jules. So it's like, is she going to be like, oh, did something happen? So I'm curious to see what ends up happening in that regard. And on the flip side of things, it's the whole Dylan and Andy's situation with Sam, they're sitting down talking to her. The fact of the matter is, it's a little awkward, but Sam says, like, the fact of the matter is, it's like, she's giving up this baby straight up because for her, she feels like she can't do a good job at being a single mom. Because, like, the baby's daddy, it's like, because she's even saying, like, I'm like the rare 2% where it's like, we did use a condom, but baby still happened anyway. So it's like, oh, I might as well do the lottery at this point in time. It's like, what was the, I got baby brain. Like, what was the question? It's like, do you want lemon with your tea or something like that? But, Dylan and Andy will love this child, give it all their love and attention that it's available to them, and, that's a good response, Sam says. But then she sees that Dylan rides a motorcycle and her uncle died, in a motorcycle accident. But, and it kind of upsets Dylan because it's like, well, I'm a very careful driver, but no matter what, it's like she still sees me as, she sees her uncle every time she sees that. And, you have Andy being like, oh, you can give up your bike. And he's like, no, you know how important it is to me. There's no way I'm going to give it up. Like, why should I kind of change so much about my life? Which is an interesting conversation between Dylan and Lizzie, because Lizzie brings up the fact that, well, look at you. You made changes because, like, Dylan's like, I don't like changes. It's like, you say that, but you made the biggest change for Andy. You left behind the CIA. You chose love over the CIA. He's like, well, yeah, that wasn't the easy thing. It's like, yeah, it wasn't easy, but you managed to do it. Like, once again, I don't think that's a situation Julian's necessarily in, because he does enjoy his work with the CIA. For Dylan, it was a complicated thing of, like, he already had his very complex feelings about the CIA, and just being with Andy was just kind of a no-brainer. It's just kind of like, I feel the way I feel about the CIA. It's just kind of like just like a lot of the operational stuff. Obviously, Dylan, he doesn't follow orders well. That's kind of his issue. But when it's all said and done, though, he does give up. He is planning to sell his bike, because for him, it's like, this baby is the most important thing, so why shouldn't I be willing to give up something that I care about? I mean, his explanation's interesting, because basically he was 16. It was the first thing, like, his bike, it was like freedom, because Dylan's had a lot of reservations and issues in his life, and I think that motorcycle was probably one of those instances of, like, oh, I feel free for the first time in my life, because a lot of stuff, probably just being gay and just having a complicated relationship with his dad, everything with his mom, at that point, because he was even younger when she died, so a lot of that probably stayed with him. And so it's just like with the bike, he probably felt, the wind in his hair, he felt free. But like I said, showing that this baby means that much means kind of giving up something like that. And for Sam, it's like that she wasn't actually expecting that. It was between them and another family. But the fact of the matter is, when she looks at Andy and the way he lights up whenever he sees Dylan, or the fact is that when she saw them holding their hands, that's what makes me choose you guys, because I see my baby. I need my baby to have a whole bunch of love, and I know that my baby will be loved by you, because I already see that there's plenty of love between you two. So I know that's just going to carry over to this child, so a beautiful ending in that regard, and just them hugging out. I was like, oh, that's super sweet. So like I said, a very interesting episode. A lot of interesting things went down, so I'm very curious to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.